got now the great pleasure to invite on stage our next speaker, Kenneth Goldsmith, born in 1961, American poet. He's founding editor of Ubuwerk, online archive and journal. He teaches poetic practice at the University of Pennsylvania. He's also editor of Penn Sound, and he hosts also a weekly radio show and has published many books of poetry, including a trilogy, The Weather, Traffic, and Sports. A very, very warm welcome to Kenneth Goldsmith.
Thanks, Hans-Ulrich. It doesn't get better than listening to Agnes Varda read Jim Morrison poems, right? It's an amazing event. I'm just going to read one piece. And who were there because they were working with this And who were there because they were working when this attack occurred described it as a war zone. One fire marshal, a gentleman by the name of Mike Smith, says everyone was screaming, crying, running, cops, people, firefighters, everyone. One businessman said, "I just saw the building I work in come down." And that, of course, is the World Trade Center, which is what had just collapsed in rubble behind him. Dust and dirt is everywhere and is still everywhere, covering nearly all of lower Manhattan. Ashes 2 to 3 inches deep in places. People were just wandering around, dazed and terrified. It's a horrifying, horrifying picture, Karen. And President Bush has called it a terrorist attack and a national tragedy, attacks on American landmarks with American Airlines airplanes. We have 2 trade towers coming down. We have a plane flying into the Pentagon, which has been evacuated and is still burning at this hour. And we have a report of a plane down, a large plane in western Pennsylvania, a 767. The FAA is also trying to locate several planes that are still missing and may be hijacked. They also say, officials, it is too soon to speculate who may have been behind this. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has denied responsibility, condemned it, and called it unbelievable, unbelievable, unbelievable. Jim? The stories that people are now telling about what happened this morning are now coming, and the eyewitnesses are telling, these horrifying tales. People before the 2 buildings collapsed, jumping out of windows, falling to their deaths, trying to escape the burning plane and the smoke. One eyewitness, a man by the name of Kenny Johanneman, tells us what he saw when he was in the building. Do we have Kenny? Apparently we don't have Kenny Johanneman there. Kenny said that he was in the basement, apparently the World Trade Center, when the building just came down and the elevator just blew up. There was lots and lots of smoke. He says, "I dragged a guy out. His skin was hanging off. I dragged him out and I helped him to an ambulance." For many people, unfortunately, there was to be no help because both buildings collapsed upon them. And recapping what we told you, we have America under attack. A terrorist attack is what President Bush is calling it. Both World Trade Center towers have collapsed. The scene in New York is one of disbelief. Smoke is now obscuring the entire skyline of Manhattan. All federal buildings in New York, Washington, and Washington, D.C. have been closed. There have been attacks in the Pentagon as well. We have a report of the Pentagon being struck by a plane. The fire is still burning there. There was a report of a car bomb outside of the State Department that has since been shot down. We also have we had a report that there was a bomb at the Capitol building, but that has also been shot down as well. Most of the federal buildings in Washington have been evacuated. The Treasury, the Capitol, even the White House, where reporters were hurriedly herded out of the building where a plane was heard circling overhead. It's unclear who was responsible for these attacks, and that will become clear in the weeks and months to come. But clearly, this was a coordinated attack. It happened in rapid-fire fashion. One plane and then another into the World Trade Center in New York, and then a 3rd plane into the Pentagon in Washington, and a 4th plane crashing. We believe it may be connected. We can't verify that yet, but crashing in Pennsylvania, this is all happening very quickly, and the reports just came in as quickly. We are boarding Air Force One. They have bomb squads out here checking out all our gear. Here on Capitol Hill, we've just been told that the Capitol is being evacuated and that all reporters follow the America Under Attack. War coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was chaos everywhere. An eyewitness describing the scene of what used to be the World Trade Center towers in Lower Manhattan. Both towers hit by airplanes this morning. We were told an American airplane jet crashed into the one tower, and then incredibly both 110-story towers collapsed. They crumbled, bodies falling from the buildings. American Airlines now says it lost 2 planes, around 160 people on board of both of these planes. They are gone. New York City is closed down. Then in Washington, another plane crashed into the Pentagon. It's one of those things that you dream of in all of your worst nightmares. It appears that a large jet aircraft, perhaps the size of a large passenger airplane, came very low, clipping off light posts as it approached the Pentagon, and it slammed into the side of the Pentagon and drove itself from the outer ring all the way to the inner ring. The area of the building that it went up into flames, and there are many, many floors of destruction deep in the heart of the Pentagon. No casualty numbers yet, but they're sure to be huge. Another large plane has crashed in southeastern Pennsylvania in Somerset County. Apparently that may be a United jet that was hijacked out of Chicago. The FBI is trying to determine who is responsible for today's attacks. All planes are grounded around the country. A gargantuan explosion. Oh my God. I don't believe it. An eyewitness to an unbelievable disaster in the past hour. A plane apparently hit one of the towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. America under attack. Our coverage continues. WABC News. This is WABC, New York City. Let's just update things a bit. We have apparently conflicting reports on that plane that went down near Pittsburgh. One report says it was a United plane from Chicago. Another report says that we left Newark Airport en route west. We're not sure of that just yet. That plane is down in Somerset County in Pennsylvania. Once again, there have been a series of attacks on landmark buildings today in Washington and in New York. Terrorists have apparently crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center. Both of the Twin Towers, each 110 stories tall, have collapsed. Incidentally, about 10,000 people work in each of these towers, and another 5,000 visit those towers during the course of a day. We don't know any casualty figures at this point. An explosion also rocked the Pentagon today. An aircraft crashed on a helicopter landing pad at the Pentagon. The west wing of the White House has been evacuated amidst threats of terrorism there. Airliners do not fly into the World Trade Center. I mean, it's just, unless they're directed that way by its pilot. Obviously, this is something that's not accidental. I think it's interesting, too, that Manhattan Island, as you pointed out, is completely locked down. We're locked down. Those of us who are on Manhattan can't get off, and those of us who are not on the island cannot get on. And for good reason, they've shut down virtually every major transit route into or out of the island. Why don't we take a quick look at traffic? Debbie? I'm sure traffic has got to be a mess. Debbie, are you there? Yes, I am. This has, traffic is a nightmare. All the bridges and tunnels getting into the city are being shut down right now. Lincoln, Holland, George, shut, forget about it, turn around, go back home. 59th Street Bridge being closed, Brooklyn Bridge, Williamsburg, Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, again, Manhattan Bridge, everything closed, heading into the city, and of course you want to avoid the area of the Twin Towers right now. You've got tons of emergency vehicles there, and all of the area airports are closed. Newark, Kennedy, LaGuardia, all of the airports are shut down. So again, avoid the city. It's a nightmare. And it almost reminds us of going back to February of 1993, where there was the first act of terrorism directed at the World Trade Center. That rider van that rolled into a parking lot with 1,500 pounds of nitrate explosives, took out 5 floors, rocked the foundation, close to half a dozen deaths, thousands of injuries, but the building was able to withstand that blast and stand tall. In this particular case, John Grambling, your observation was in observing A, the second airplane that crashed into the South Tower, that both towers collapsed almost within an hour and a half. Very, at least to me, and I'm not a construction expert, but it just seems to me that there was absolutely awfully rapid for this to have been the result of the airplane crashes and the fire. Although the fuels were very intense, obviously fueled by the jet fuel that was on board on both of those aircraft. I think the other thing that we have to understand here is that this is really the first time in American history that our government has really gone into exile. I mean, our government at the moment, they're in control. They're controlling things, and they're discussing things. Everything, they're discussing it, but they're in exile. Is it okay if a few of us start to assume that this is a terrorist attack? Well, you know, you can assume it. I just don't think that, based on what G.W. Bush is talking about, he is President of the United States, Ron. I know that, but he's often not the most well-informed guy around, Bill. Well, but right now you would think he would be locked into the information loop. You think so? And you would even hope, but I'm not assuming, Bob. I think it's fair to say that people in the Middle East who have declared America to be the big Satan, and wait! Not only have we called them terrorists, but now we're pointing fingers, okay? Well, excuse me, Ron. Who had targeted the World Trade Center before? And you even explained why they targeted it. I remember when the Murrah building went up, and for about a day and a half, everybody was talking about, yes, the terrorist cells right there in Oklahoma. It's a hotbed of Middle Eastern Arabic activity. Nobody doubted that those were Arab terrorists who blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma. Well, it turned out to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, corn-fed country boys. Ron, can we talk? Can we talk about probabilities, though? I mean, it's more likely that this had something to do with the Middle East than it does with the Michigan militia. Wouldn't it be more likely? Well, wouldn't it have been the case in the Murrah Federal Building, too? It absolutely would have been more likely that the terrorists that blew up the Federal Building in Oklahoma, that it was, in fact, just a bunch of neo-Nazis. Ron, as you know, in radical Muslim literature, they refer to New York City as sort of the Jewish capital of the world, even larger in scope than Tel Aviv. Well, certainly the Twin Towers were specific targets of the original bombing, and I know those folks who were convicted of it, and they specifically talked about the importance of hitting the Trade Center as a target of American wealth and power. Well, MSNBC did an interview with Lawrence Eagleburger, former Secretary of State, and he just said that this was a total intelligence breakdown, and that the magnitude of the attack, he considers this a total act of war, and there hasn't been anything like it since Pearl Harbor. He considers the devastation. He equated it to Pearl Harbor. He said that basically only Osama bin Laden would have the capacity to coordinate this. He says an attack like this takes months or years to coordinate, and that's why he says there was a total breakdown in our intelligence. He also pointed out the obvious, that we had thought we had licked hijacking in this country, and apparently, at least, it appears on the surface that we have not licked hijacking, and there is a way, whatever they did with weapons, or whether they just rushed the cockpit, or whatever they did, if they did that, it remains a possibility here in the United States. So Lawrence Eagleburger said that George Bush needs to respond quickly, hard, and even go after terrorism wherever terrorism exists, indicating even if we don't know for sure that those were the people directly responsible, we must go after those who would support Osama bin Laden and who have in the past. Well, so Lawrence Eagleburger advocated attacking who? Well, he said our first target should be Osama bin Laden. He also talked about the Taliban and Afghanistan and the government in Afghanistan. We warned them, apparently according to him, to our State Department, though Washington would say that anything in the future would occur against any American targets, that they would be held responsible for if bin Laden was implicated or found to be responsible, and you know. Two things, Steve, We would have attacked Osama bin Laden already if we knew where he was. Well, that's just what I was going to bring up. Several weeks ago, maybe several months ago, you know the way time flies, I remember saying on the air Osama bin Laden was handing out promotional videotapes to the media. Osama bin Laden was interviewed by, I don't know which network, which means but you're saying we know where he is. Well, we have to know where he is. Well, I don't think he's holding a news conference today. No, not today. Well, I don't know where he is. And I don't think that he's responsible, with all due respect to Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. If this was a matter of free people coordinating a hijacking of free planes, you don't need a huge infrastructure and a lot of money. This was not a particularly high-tech attack, although it was obviously a well-coordinated and well-planned one. But you don't need 100 or 200 people. You don't need. But Ron, Afghanistan has consistently given sanctuary to Osama bin Laden and his minions. They've been warned about this not just by the United Nations, but internationally, also by their fellow Muslim countries who also fear Osama bin Laden because of his radical fundamentalist ways. And if you're providing a base, a haven, a sanctuary for a terrorist who has targeted the United States and Israel, well then you're just as culpable because you do nothing to sort of relieve yourself of that. Again, we're making a leap here that I just don't think is justified in making, which is that we've assigned blame to Osama bin Laden. Obviously, he's a #1 suspect in any, well, I'll bet he's got a big smile on his face right now. Yeah. Either way, he's probably happy, but you can't kill a guy for being happy. Oh, actually, given the way I feel right now, you probably could. But hopefully, tomorrow, well, look, take the day off, actually, and I'm not a huge fan of military power, but it would be nice to see an aircraft or a military jet flying the perimeter around here. Absolutely. You would expect to see that at any moment. You would expect to see U.S. military flying around the World Trade Center and also perhaps around the Empire State Building or any other monument that we have. Well, in fact, the only times we've ever had crashes into buildings in New York, obviously there are high buildings and planes are constantly flying overhead. But today is clear day. It's a blue sky. That's not what this is. Couldn't be. Couldn't be. Even if navigation systems failed. George Weber is at the scene of the World Trade Center now. George, tell us what you know at the moment. Bruce, I've moved a good ways east. I'm standing next to the Manhattan Bridge, and just below me is a park right near the edge of Chinatown. And while there's some curiosity among these people, they continue to play their card games. They continue to chat as if nothing's going on. Their markets are open. They're shopping. They're buying their fish. It's as if this little corner of New York City was totally unaffected. But you know, it's at the top of their minds. They're talking about it. They're pointing up in the air, periodically, and they're continuing with their card games. So it's just a little snapshot of a piece of New York as they deal with this immense tragedy. Thank you.